Hey, what's up, guys? Let's check out this game by the great attacking player Alekhine. So in this game, our hero has the black pieces, and he's playing against Mieses. So his opponent plays e4, and he responds with e5. And white plays the center game, d4. So black takes, and after qx d4, black plays knight c6. Queen e3. This is the right square for the queen to retreat to. Often in this opening, white will try to swing the queen over here to g3 at a key moment to surprise black with some sort of mate threats. And we'll see something like that in this game, actually. So bishop e7 is played. And this is actually a very interesting move. In light of what we had just mentioned, queen g3 being an idea for white, this move bishop e7 has maybe an idea of playing bishop h4 at a key moment to disturb the queen from that post. So white plays bishop d2, and after nf6, nc3, 0-0, white castles queenside with 0-0-0. Here's sort of the first interesting moment of the game. Imagine you're playing as black. What move would you play? Well, you might be tempted to play something like, for instance, d6, with the idea of bringing the bishop out into the game along this diagonal. It's a very logical and natural move. Here, white could just continue with the plan queen g3, which is simple and strong. But white also has this very interesting idea of bishop e1 against this move d6. It creates a pin along the d file and introduces all kinds of tricky ideas like f4 followed by e5. That could be difficult for black to deal with. So what else could black try here? You could maybe think, all right, well, if I can't develop the bishop in this direction with d6, maybe I'll try b6. This would also be a logical move, but again, simply queen g3 is simple and very strong. If you continue with your plan of bishop g7, then already white can just play, for instance, knight f3 and have a really dangerous attack on the king side. Let's say you were to, I don't know, what would be a logical move here? Possibly bishop b4, something like this. Here, of course, just a3 could be a problem, but white can continue development with bishop c4, and already white has the kind of dream position in the center game where all of these pieces have the ability to apply pressure to black's castled king. And so, taking us back to this position, d6 is not really sufficient. b6 is not really sufficient either. Black needs something a little bit different. Alekhine came up with the move d5. It's a bold move, and here his opponent took the pawn. Now, it's important to calculate what if white were to push, which might occur to you as an alternative. However, black could just push as well. Of course, white would need to save the queen. Well, she wanted to go to g3 anyway, so perhaps it's not that big of a deal. But if black takes the knight now and white takes this knight, then black is able to take the bishop on d2 with check. So black would emerge with an extra piece in this variation, which is why pushing the pawn is not possible for white. Instead, white simply takes on d5. And now, after knight takes d5, the queen does finally run away to g3. Okay, another interesting moment in the game. White is preparing the classic bishop h6 attack, which would threaten checkmate and win the exchange if black were to play g6, for instance, to not be mated. How could black respond? Well, there's a couple different good moves here. but Aлекhine's move was the best. It's this move, bishop h4. It disturbs the queen from the square g3, where she was happily attacking black's king, and she can't really easily stay in this part of the board. The light square bishop takes away g4 and h3, and of course the dark square bishop is hitting g5 and g3, so the queen needs to flee to f3, where she's not quite as dangerous. And now Alekhine completes his development with bishop e6, and white plays a very nice move, bishop e3. Rather than developing, although perhaps development is important, here white sets up a position that poses black many problems. Put yourself in black's shoes. What would you play here? Well, one move that might jump out at you is a move like knight e5, which attacks the queen and prepares to maybe play c6 to hold on to this knight in the center. However, this move would fail to rook, believe it or not, rook takes d5, and after bishop takes d5, well, you could just play queen takes d5 and we're winning some material here. So that doesn't quite work. Of course, after rook takes d5, if black were to take the queen, well, this was the variation that white was hoping for with rook takes d5. We have rook takes d8 now. And if black takes back, or ax d8, then after nx f3, white has emerged with 4 minor pieces and a rook versus 2 bishops and 2 rooks. It's still a chess game for sure, but white would have a pretty sizable advantage. Okay, and so because of that, knight e5 is not really playable. What is an alternative? Well, one thing you might try to deal with this annoying pin that white created with the very clever move bishop e3 would be to support this knight a second time. Something like knight e7 comes to mind as a very logical move, but here you run into many of the same problems. After knight takes d5, again, you could play knight takes d5 or bishop takes d5. It doesn't particularly matter, but let's say we play bishop takes d5. Here, once again, there is a little tactic that would get white some material. This move queen h5. It's a very nice idea. It attacks this bishop as well as putting pressure on this one. So if black were to now retreat the bishop, for instance, to f6, the move c4 makes use of the pin along the d file. So white would be emerging with a sizable advantage there. So because of that, knight e7 does not quite solve the problem of the pin either. You might think, okay, well, what about moving the knight to b4? Same idea, right? I'm going to support my knight on d5. Maybe, possibly, I'm even threatening like knight takes a2. However, white can refute this with a very simple move a3, just attacking the knight. And now it's not so easy for black. Simply retreating runs into everything we saw before, and if you support the pawn with something like a5, then, okay, while that may be the best move, it doesn't really solve the issue. You're still going to be losing the knight there. Okay, and so that leaves us with not very many good-looking options. Well, you may have already guessed it. Alekhine was forced to be brilliant. In order to solve this pin, he simply played knight takes c3 and said, okay, I certainly don't want to lose material. But after rook takes d8, this is an interesting moment. Black has just won a knight, so he's up 3 points, but lost a queen, so down 9. What should black do here? Well, he could just capture back, but if he were to capture back right now, then after pawn takes knight, he would be down a significant amount of material. However, what he could do instead, after rook takes d8, is nx a2 check. And here, when the king moves, now our ax d8, and if you count up the material, Alekhine got a knight, a pawn, and a rook. So a rook is 5 points, a knight is 3 points, so that's 8, and a pawn is 1 point, so that's 9 points altogether. So in exchange for his queen, he got enough material for the queen. You got 9 points worth of material. It's an incredible combination and a way to solve the pressure along the d-file that most players would not think of during the game. Certainly I wouldn't have. In any case, at this point, white played bishop e2, continuing development, and black played the move knight b5. Okay, white is trying to bring his pieces into the game with knight h3, and black centralizes his rooks. Here, he plans not only to put pressure on the king side, but also eyes ideas with bishop e4 attacking the queen. Is now introduced as a, oops, sorry, that was not played in the game, obviously, as an idea. Bishop e4 is introduced as an idea. Okay, and so now rook c1 was played by white. And here, Alekhine played the move g6, firming up the f5 square and creating the possibility of bringing back his bishop to point it to the king side, possibly retreating it to g7 as well. g4 is played, very ambitious by white. And here Alekhine plays the move bishop b4. And it looks almost as if the queen is trapped, but she does have one square on h3. So here she doesn't have a lot of options. She goes to the only square she can move to. And now bishop f6 is played. And this is really a beautiful moment in the game, just to sort of pause and look at. Both bishops are pointed at white's king. These knights are very aggressively placed. They have great control of the center and the king side of the board. And the rooks could not be better placed. Both rooks are on open files. I mean, this is a dream position in terms of piece harmony. Can't really get much better than this. White plays bishop f3, looking to exchange off this strong bishop that's pinning the c-pawn. And Alekhine obliges. The bishop didn't really have anywhere else to go. It couldn't safely retreat, and the square f5 was hit by a pawn, so bishop takes bishop was more or less forced here. After queen takes, now Alekhine decides to centralize his knight with knight e5. This gains a tempo from hitting the queen, and after she runs away, we have an interesting moment in the game. I think queen e2 likely was played to prevent the knight from coming to c4. Once again, both knights are on fantastic squares. The bishop could not really be improved. The rooks are on open files in the center of the board. So what should black do here? It's hard to improve upon a position that has such fantastic harmony. When all of your pieces occupy really good squares, you know, what do you do? Well, as we've seen before, Alekhine initiates an attack with a pawn push, c5. Now, this holds the knight on b4, but it also introduces the idea of c4, c3, opening up lines to white's king. So rook g1 was played by white, and now comes c4 right away. Here, white tries to attack on the king side of the board with h4 and h5 ideas, trying to open up a line in order to create checkmate threats. However, Alekhine simply plays this move, looking to either trade off this knight or perhaps trade off this bishop, but also introduce ideas of possibly pushing this pawn forward. Well, white is happy to get rid of one of these knights, but after rook takes e4, white goes wrong with the move f4, attacking his knight, but inviting a really interesting move. It's a very hard move to see, but if you want to pause your video and ask yourself what would you play if you were black here, now's a good time to do it. So Alekhine plays the incredible move knight d3. It's possible his opponent did not see this move as an option when he played f4. It may have come as a surprise. He responded with queen f3. Now you might be thinking, okay, what about pawn takes knight? Well, the problem with pawn takes knight, or the idea behind it, is after rook takes d3, the bishop on e3 is pinned by our rook on e8, and so we'll be able to win that bishop on the next turn. White could try to defend this bishop once more with rook g3. However, we have an additional attacker on the dark squares as well, simply bishop d4, and black will be getting the piece back, and we'll have enough initiative in order to hold a draw. Okay, and so instead in the game after this move knight d3, white moved the queen to f3, and now we see a change of theater. Black is attacking white's king. White decides to take the knight now, allowing rook takes b2 check. Of course, king c1 is the correct direction for the white king to move. If the white king were to move to a1, this would allow for a discovered check. The rook could simply move to f2, the bishop would check the king, the rook would grab the queen, and then black would have a pretty straightforward win from there. And so after king c1, now pawn takes on d3. And this is an important idea. This pawn is going to act as an anchor, which will allow the rook to come to c8 and then to c2. This will create a lot of checkmate threats around white's king. White plays king d1, which does not really adequately respond to the threat. The rook comes to c8 now, and the move g5 is losing. White needed to get rid of this pawn, and he could have done it with a move like queen e4. Queen e4 has a few different ideas, but one of them is simply to take this pawn. If rook to c2 now, white can play queen takes d3, and there's no more checkmate threats. Rook b1 would not work. We could simply play king takes rook in that case. However, the move that was played in the game after rook c8 was pawn g5, and this allows the two rooks to come to the 7th rank. And very difficult for white to defend now. In fact, white is completely lost. The threat of just rook b1 followed by rook takes bishop would be checkmate. Can't really be responded to in a meaningful way. The king tries to run away, but now Alekhine played, actually in the game, I believe Alekhine played, yes, rook b1 check. And then after queen d1, bishop c3 check, and white just resigned here. The queen will fall, but it will also be mate in a few more moves. All right, this was an amazing game. I hope you guys enjoyed this one as much as I did.